Could Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, lose their royal titles? And what would that mean for them and their children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet? This is something I've seen discussed a lot on mainstream and social media over the last couple of years. So today on History Calling, I'm going to look at the historic precedents for stripping people of their titles, at how feasible it would be to do this to the Sussexes, and at the other ways in which the couple could, theoretically, become Mr and Mrs Mountbatten-Windsor. I'm sure we all already know the story of Harry and Meghan's exit from the royal family, but for those of you living under a rock since the late 2010s, here's a quick recap. Prince Harry married American actress Meghan Markle in St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle on the 19th of May 2018. On the day of the wedding, Harry was created Duke of Sussex, Earl of Dumbarton and Baron Kilkeel by his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. He also holds a knighthood as of 2015, though that is never mentioned much. Meghan holds the female versions of these titles and is generally known as the Duchess of Sussex. The couple had a son, then known as Archie Mountbatten-Windsor, on the 6th of May 2019, but then made a shock announcement at the start of 2020 that they were stepping back from royal life. They subsequently moved to Canada, then the United States. They agreed at that time to stop using their HRH titles, which is short for His or Her Royal Highness, but their other titles were not affected, and it's important to note that they didn't lose the HRHs, they just don't use them. Since their departure, they have had a daughter, Lilibet, born on the 4th of June 2021, and have engaged in a series of public attacks on other members of the royal family, most notably King Charles, Queen Camilla, and the Prince and Princess of Wales. This has led to their own popularity in the UK and elsewhere plummeting. For example, an Ipsos poll from January 2024 gave Harry a favourable rating of 23%, while 30% of people polled didn't know if they liked or disliked him, and 47% reported unfavourable feelings towards him. Meghan's figures were even worse, at 18% favourable, 28% didn't know, and 54% unfavourable. To provide some context, the best scoring royal was Harry's brother, Prince William, with 62% favourable, 26% unknown, and 12% unfavourable. The Princess of Wales had almost identical scores. Another poll, or rather a series of polls, this time from Statista, shows Harry's popularity dropping from 72% in November 2019 to 25% by March 2023, though it recovered slightly to 31% by that August. Their attacks on other royals, whilst still using their own titles, and their massive drop in popularity, have led to calls for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to be stripped of all their royal titles and reduced to Mr and Mrs Mountbatten-Windsor, which is the surname preferred by the male line descendants of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and Queen Elizabeth II. That's why Archie and Lilibet were originally known by that surname. More on that, though, in a few minutes. Now we get to the crux of the issue. Could Prince Harry be relieved of his titles, and what would that mean for him and his family? Historically, there are plenty of precedents for royals and members of the aristocracy losing their titles. Some of the most famous include the future Henry VII, who was born the Earl of Richmond in 1457, but whose earldom was taken off him in childhood. His wife, Elizabeth of York, and all her siblings were declared illegitimate in 1483, a declaration ratified by Parliament in 1484, and as a result they lost their rank as princes and princesses, and in one case a king. That declaration was reversed by Parliament during the early days of Henry's reign in late 1485, however, and their titles were restored. Then there are their granddaughters, Mary and Elizabeth Tudor, both born princesses of England until their father, Henry VIII, decided they too were illegitimate and took their titles off them. Those are medieval and early modern examples, of course, when the monarch was much better able to do as they pleased and just get Parliament to rubber stamp their decisions. What about more recent history, as the monarchy is now a constitutional one and the positions have basically reversed, with Parliament in charge? Before I reveal the answer, if you're enjoying this content, please take a moment to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel with the notification bell switched on so that YouTube lets you know when I upload. For more from History Calling, you can also find me on Patreon, where I share bonus material including early access to ad-free videos, mini podcasts and blog posts. In addition, I have an Amazon storefront where I've gathered together some recommendations for history-themed books, TV shows, movies and more. Both are linked in the description box below for you, as is my Instagram account. In November 1917, as World War I raged, an Act of Parliament was passed in the United Kingdom known as the Titles Deprivation Act 1917. This was directed against, quote, any persons enjoying any dignity or title as a peer or British prince who have, during the present war, borne arms against His Majesty, meaning George V, or his allies, or who have adhered to His Majesty's enemies. It further clarified that a person shall be deemed to have adhered to His Majesty's enemies if, since the commencement of the present war, he has voluntarily resided in an enemy country, or if he has served in the enemy forces or in any way rendered assistance to the enemy. The Act then explained what would happen to anyone penalised by it, saying, the name of such person, if he be a peer, shall be struck out of the peerage roll, and all rights of such peer to receive a writ of summons and to sit in the House of Lords or to take part in the election of representative peers shall cease and determine. All privileges and all rights to any dignity or title, whether in respect of a peerage or under any royal warrant or letters patent, shall cease and determine. It did not affect, quote, the title or succession of any person to any estates or other property, and there was an appeal mechanism put in place for anyone who felt they had been unfairly targeted. In March 1919, after an inquiry into who had borne arms against the king or adhered to his enemies during the war, which was by then over, the Act was used to strip 4 men of their titles. The most important thing to note about this legislation, at least for the purposes of this discussion, is how limited its scope was. It was not a blanket rule which could be applied to anyone at any time. It very specifically targeted the enemies of Britain and its allies during the Great War. It does not affect Prince Harry or anyone else now living. So what is the position when it comes to Harry's titles? The answer, as far as I can tell from my research, and please do bear in mind that I'm not a lawyer, is that it's a bit of a mess. I read a very interesting article on this from the Middle Temple website written by legal expert Graham Zellick, which I'm going to link below for you. Basically, Zellick says that Harry's HRH is honorific and could be withdrawn by the monarch. He argues something similar for his title of Prince and his knighthood, saying they too fall within the royal prerogative and so could be removed at the king's will, a decision which could not be challenged in court. Honours such as knighthoods, damehoods and MBEs, etc. are usually only removed in cases where a crime has been committed though, and the honours system brought into disrepute as a result. This is called a forfeiture. I've linked a government website about this topic in the description box for you if you want to learn more. Now for Harry's dukedom, earldom and barony. While these were granted by letters patent, the widespread view advanced by commentators and in legal literature is that they can only be revoked by Act of Parliament, just as the 1917 Act paved the way for the ultimate removal of titles from men who were basically considered enemies of the state. Zellick questions this view, however. He feels that the 1917 Act should not be taken as a legal precedent for the current case, and comes to the conclusion, quote, that a hereditary peerage of first creation, which is what Harry's titles are, he didn't inherit them and he was given them by virtue of the royal prerogative, can be withdrawn by revocation of the letters patent creating it, which is done simply by issuing new letters patent, end quote. If you'd like to better understand his arguments, which I've summarised and simplified here so that people's brains don't explode, I really do recommend you read his article. So as it stands, despite Zellick's misgivings about it, even he acknowledges that the majority view is that parliamentary legislation would be required to remove Harry's dukedom, earldom and barony. We know from the 1917 Act that such legislation can be created and passed, and this has led to an attempt to update it so that it can be used against the Sussexes. On the 11th of December 2023, Conservative MP Bob Seely presented a private member's bill in the House of Commons which proposed the amendment of the Titles Deprivation Act 1917 in order, quote, to deprive, in certain circumstances, princes of their British dignities and titles, end quote. This was very specifically aimed at Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex, as Mr Seely made clear in an article he wrote for the Daily Mail, which said, among other things, in the next couple of weeks I shall present a bill in Parliament to strip the Duke and Duchess of Sussex of their royal titles. If someone doesn't want to be royal, that is a decision we respect, but they should not keep the titles and privileges if they trash an institution that plays an important part in our nation's life. The couple and their supporters have a track record of attacking the royal family with unproven and incendiary allegations, which they then appear to deny or refuse to back up, which is indefensible. It is time for us all to move on. I believe it is time they dropped their titles, or were made to, and lived by their own talents, if they have any to speak of. The sooner the Duke and Duchess become just Mr and Mrs Sussex, the better for us all. I'll leave a link to the entire article below. The only thing I'd like to point out here is that the Duke and Duchess wouldn't be Mr and Mrs Sussex unless they changed their name by whatever the American equivalent of Deed-poll is, because Sussex is their title. The family surname, as I've said, is Mountbatten-Windsor. Seely's bill was given its first reading in December and is due a second on the 14th of June 2024. If this bill was to pass, then presumably it could indeed be used to strip the Duke of his titles, and as Meghan's titles all come from the fact that she is married to Harry, she would lose hers too. If he's not the Duke of Sussex, then she's not the Duchess. I don't know at this point what it would mean for their children, as not enough detail about Seely's proposals has been released. They are currently Prince Archie of Sussex and Princess Lilibet of Sussex because their father is the Duke of Sussex. I've read some complaints about the fact that their parents have had them start using Sussex as a surname, but in actual fact this is completely normal within the royal family. Up until Harry's wedding day, when he was made a royal duke, he was Prince Harry of Wales and used Wales as his surname because his father was the Prince of Wales at that point. Likewise, prior to being made the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William was Prince William of Wales for the same reason, and now that he is the Prince of Wales himself, he's back to being able to use it as a surname if he wants. His children at birth were Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis of Cambridge. They are now Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis of Wales. That's how the system works. William and Harry's cousins, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, are princesses of York because their father is Prince Andrew, Duke of York. Incidentally, I'm not sure if the fact that they are now married has changed that, by the way. It is not normal to be a prince or princess and use the family's actual surname. So if Harry lost his titles, then what would Archie and Lilibet be prince and princess of? I don't know how this would work, but it's something that would need to be addressed because I don't think there's much of an appetite to strip these unoffending children of their titles just to get a dig in at their parents. How likely is it, though, that a private member's bill would actually get all the way through to becoming a law? The answer is not very. Here is what the UK Parliament's own website has to say about them, and again I've linked my source below for you. Private members' bills are public bills introduced by MPs and Lords who are not government ministers. As with other public bills, their purpose is to change the law as it applies to the general population. A minority of private members' bills become law, but by creating publicity around an issue, they may affect legislation indirectly. Like other public bills, private members' bills can be introduced in either house and must go through the same set stages. However, as less time is allocated to these bills, it is less likely that they will proceed through all the stages. So it's unlikely that legislation will be passed to take Prince Harry's titles off him. Now let's consider for a moment if he really deserves to lose them. This is a question which I know is going to provoke a lot of very strong and very different opinions. I can only give you my thoughts on the matter, and while you're free to express your own in the comments, please keep everything clean and civil. As I see it, the 1917 Act was designed to revoke the titles of men who had committed crimes against their country by taking up arms against it or supporting an enemy state then at war with the UK in some other way. The bar for stripping people of their titles was set very high, and I think that is how it should be. Prince Harry is not a convicted criminal. Falling out with your family and publicly saying mean things about them is not a criminal offence, even if it is very ill-advised and frankly nasty. Plenty of us will have had similarly bad experiences with family members, just not on the public stage, and we aren't punished by society for it, because that would be a completely unsustainable social policy. The issue of whether people should be allowed to keep their titles should not be reduced to a popularity contest, in my opinion. That would be a very slippery slope to go down, especially as popularity peaks and wanes. There have been plenty of royals throughout history who were very unpopular and did much worse than the Sussexes have done, and they weren't stripped of their titles. Some of them are even quite recent. The former King Edward VII became His Royal Highness the Duke of Windsor after his abdication, and despite his evident Nazi sympathies, he remained so until his death. He didn't even have to stop using his HRH. Remember too, when the then Prince Charles was at rock bottom in the polls in the 1990s after his split from Diana, with people saying he shouldn't be allowed to inherit the throne. As for Queen Camilla, she's effected one of the greatest reputational turnarounds in royal history. She may not be universally popular, and I think Diana, Princess of Wales, will always outshine her, even from beyond the grave, but when you consider where she started back in the 1990s, her rehabilitation has been nothing short of a PR masterpiece. Then we come to Prince Andrew. Unlike Prince Harry, the King's younger brother actually has been accused, but not charged or convicted, of a serious crime, though he steadfastly denies any wrongdoing. Any punishment levelled at the Sussexes will also open a can of worms with regards to Andrew, who has been keeping a low profile since a disastrous TV interview in 2019. Because if you're going to take the Sussexes' titles off them, you can hardly justify leaving Andrew's intact. Next, we have to think about the future. Who knows what members of the family will do in the years, decades, and maybe even centuries still to come, which will cause public anger. If we start saying that only people who score well in polls can have the crown, be in line for it, or keep their titles, then the entire institution of monarchy will fall apart very quickly. Now, of course, some people would be delighted about the prospect of leveraging the current problems in such a way as to create a republic, but the professed aim of those who want to take Harry and Meghan's titles off them, such as Bob Seeley, is to protect the firm, not destroy it. Consider too that in the future it could be the case that senior members of the royal family genuinely act badly, but their relations are too afraid to call them out on it in case they are punished by having their titles removed. Basically, I'm not sure that those who want to reduce the Sussexes to Mr and Mrs Mountbatten-Windsor on the basis of their actions so far have thought the long-term ramifications of their suggestion all the way through. I don't like a lot of what they've said or done either, but they don't exist in a bubble, and any action taken against them sets a precedent that could prove impossible to reverse and which could adversely affect others who don't deserve similar treatment. Then we have the expense and difficulty involved in pushing through this legislation. To make this law would take up a significant portion of Parliament's time. Time that could be used to debate and pass laws which would actually have a meaningful and hopefully positive effect on the lives of UK citizens. Making Harry and Meghan a Mr and Mrs is not going to put any more money in people's pockets, or get them a better house, or better quality food, or public services. It could also lead to an extremely lengthy and expensive court case, with the government's legal bill footed by the taxpayer, if the Duke and Duchess fought it. Indeed, even if the King tried to remove their titles himself without recourse to Parliament, that could lead to legal challenges too. Finally, consider for a moment what this would do to the royal family on a personal level. Do you really want to ask the King to sign into law a bill which would deprive his own child, and perhaps his brother Andrew too, of their titles, when Charles III has not publicly displayed any appetite to do such a thing? It's arguably cruel to force one family member to act against another in this way. So it's unlikely that Harry's titles will be forcibly removed, but are there other ways he could lose them? First, could he voluntarily surrender them? Well, to return to Graham Zellick's article for a moment, he argues that a wish to be relieved of a peerage has no legal significance. So while Harry could cease to use his titles, he would still have them. He is further unable to disclaim them because rather than inheriting them, he, quote, accepted the offer of a newly created hereditary peerage. In February 2024, though, Harry gave an interview which raised another potential way in which he could surrender all his titles, from his HRH all the way down to his knighthood. He was asked if he had considered becoming an American citizen, and he responded, "I have considered it, yeah. The American citizenship is a thought that has crossed my mind, but certainly not something that is a high priority for me right now." When asked what would stop him from doing it, he said, "I have no idea." Experts on the American legal system were quick to point out one potential reason, though, which is that if he did become a citizen, he would have to renounce his British titles. This is because of a very particular clause in the laws surrounding people becoming naturalised citizens of the US, which states, "Any applicant who has any titles of hereditary or positions of nobility in any foreign state must renounce the title or the position. The applicant must expressly renounce the title in a public ceremony, and USIS must record the renunciation as part of the proceedings. Failure to renounce the title of position shows a lack of attachment to the Constitution." In order to renounce a title or position, the applicant must add one of the following phrases to the oath of allegiance. "I further renounce the title of," give title or titles, "which I have heretofore held," or "I further renounce the order of nobility," give the order of nobility, "to which I have heretofore belonged." The general oath of allegiance to the United States of America would also cause some awkwardness for Harry, as he would be obliged to say the following. "I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen." In his case, of course, the foreign prince in question would be his father, or, if it was years down the line, potentially his brother. Interestingly, though, Harry could do this and still retain his British citizenship. English actress Emily Blunt has become a naturalised US citizen, for example, but has specifically said that she's now a dual national. Despite having to renounce allegiance to Queen Elizabeth, the monarch on the throne at the time Miss Blunt took the oath, her British citizenship was not terminated. Some legal experts have mused too that perhaps Harry could even be granted an exemption. In a quote published on Newsweek.com, a lawyer named Alphonse Provinciano said that, "I was interested in whether Prince Harry has to renounce all of his titles or not. It's a law stated by Congress, and all the Constitution says is Congress can't confer foreign titles. But it doesn't say anything about being a foreign citizen or having a title when you become a US citizen. I think there's actually a challenge to this under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment because it treats people differently." To my mind, the problem here is that no case like this has ever, to the best of my knowledge, come before the American courts. The Duke of Windsor, another royal famous for marrying an American, never attempted to become an American himself, so there's no precedent. I also have another question, which is how would British and American laws interact in this case? According to Zellick, Harry can't voluntarily surrender his titles under British law, so does the American oath of allegiance really take them from him, or does it just mean that those titles wouldn't be recognised in the States and other US territories? I don't know, and that's one for the lawyers to discuss in the comments section. Fortunately for Meghan, Archie and Lilibet, they do not need to worry about any of this. As they were born US citizens, they do not have to renounce any titles they have gained along the way in order to retain that citizenship. To give another historical example proving this, Grace Kelly, who became the Princess of Monaco, was able to retain her American citizenship according to the website of the foundation set up in her name by her husband. I've seen other websites state that she lost or had to surrender it upon marriage, but I don't believe this is true, both because of what the foundation says and because Princess Grace's children obtained American citizenship through her, and I imagine they couldn't have done so if she'd no longer been a US citizen at the time of their births. I'm not a lawyer though, so don't quote me on that, or indeed on any of the legalities discussed in this video. Interestingly, and this is just a little side note, there is a precedent in recent British royal history for someone to renounce their titles upon taking up citizenship of another country. Harry's grandfather, born on the island of Corfu as Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, renounced his birth titles upon becoming a British citizen before marrying the then Princess Elizabeth, though I'm not sure he was legally obliged to do so. He was swiftly made His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh though, and later restored to being a prince of the realm, just not the realm he was born in. By the by, just to revisit the Princess Grace discussion for a moment, I've never heard of his children being entitled to Greek citizenship, presumably because he wasn't a Greek citizen anymore when they were born. But if you disagree, let me know in the comments section. So there is potentially a way for Harry and Meghan to become Mr and Mrs Mountbatten-Windsor without the UK Parliament or the King having to intervene. But it would be entirely up to the Prince. It would be awkward to have to renounce the country of his birth and his own parent as part of the Oath of Allegiance, and it's unclear to me if an American law can override a British one except in American territory. There have also been questions raised about whether he is truly eligible for such citizenship, as he is admitted to indulging in what I'm going to call, in order to stay on YouTube's good side, some naughty behaviour. But that issue is not within the purview of this video. As for his position in the line of succession, which I raise only because I know I'll get questions about it if I don't, that definitely can't be altered without an act of Parliament. Just taking his titles off him wouldn't affect it. So there you have it. Could Prince Harry and the Duchess be stripped of their titles? Technically yes, but it's highly unlikely. Could Harry surrender them? Maybe, though it depends of all things on the American legal system, but personally I think that's quite unlikely too. I'd be amazed if Harry voluntarily proceeded with any moves to become a US citizen unless he was assured it wouldn't affect his titles. I think that might only happen if it really looked like they were going to be taken off him and he wanted to create the impression that he jumped rather than being pushed. I hope you find this interesting. Please do let me know below how likely you think it is that Harry and Meghan will ever lose or surrender their titles. And for more royal history, try one of these options next. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep learning.